Okay, item 2 is approved. Item number 3, presentation, discussion, and action on the following items. A, fiscal year 2018 audited financial report. B, financial activities, second quarter of fiscal year 2019. C, board resolution adopting an updated investment policy. And D, board resolution authorizing submission of an annual compliance report to TxDOT.
Good morning, Robert Stewart, Director of Finance. With us this morning is Mr. Craig Gibson from Gibson Road. Sorry, good morning. Robert Studer, Director of Finance. With us this morning is Mr. Craig Gibson from Gibson Ruddock Patterson, here to deliver our FY 2018 audited report.
Good morning. We met with the Finance Committee yesterday and kind of went into a little more detail into the audit. Had a number of very good questions. In a nutshell, the audit resulted in a unmodified opinion, which is also referred to as a clean opinion, which everybody would like to have. Also, this audit included a state and federal single audit, and that report also resulted in a clean report, and there are no findings in the document. I believe everybody was provided with the complete audit. In addition to the audit, we issued a management letter, which does include two recommendations for some processes we would like to see adopted, and I believe management has already addressed those. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to address them.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Mr. Parker, would you like to make comments on the meeting from yesterday?
No,
Discussion?
Any of the committee members like to comment? We thought it was a very good presentation. Thank you very much, and Madam Chair.
Okay. If there are no further questions, then thank you very much, Greg. Thank you for your whole staff. We appreciate working with you all, and we thank our staff as well for working hard to making sure we have a clean audit every year.
I would like to commend y'all for the addition to your staffing. He did a great job, helped with the audit, and you can see, and I'm sure as a board you can see the difference in the information that you're able to get from him. So it was a position that I think was definitely needed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibson. Appreciate it. We're going to take these all together.
This would be separate. This
Oh,
would
we
be
need to do this separate.
a
Okay.
motion to accept.
So-
Yes, ma'am.
If so, then the Finance Committee yesterday approved this and recommended it forward to the board for its approval.
So that's your motion?
And that is the motion.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So let's move on to 3B, financial activities, second quarter fiscal year 2019. Mr. Studer.
Good morning again. Bear with us as we're having some issues with the backup coming up. So I don't know if I can bring this full screen. IT's touching it, so we'll see. Robert Studer, Director of Finance. This morning I'm going to be presenting to you our second quarter financial statement. It's preliminary and unaudited. The numbers are provided by the City of El Paso. We're going to talk about second quarter highlights. I'll give them a second here if we can't pull this up. If they're okay with it, I'll just present off of this and we'll have it not full screen. So we're going to go over the second quarter highlights. We're going to look at our statement of net position. We're going to look at our statement of revenues, expenses, changes in net position. We're going to look at some detail by fund, and then what to expect for the rest of FY19. I'm going to leave you with a few key highlights that I'd like you to take away, because because there's a lot of information here, and the idea is that each time that I come before you, that we'll give you a little bit more to take away, as there's a lot of information and it's very complex. We have many diverse funding sources, and so it can be a little tricky. So, second quarter highlights, again, to remind you, these numbers are preliminary and unaudited. I want to mention the timing of our trustee activity. So we have several projects that are funded through monies that we get from other sources that are put with trustees that are not held by the city of El Paso. The timing of those statements is a little bit delayed, and therefore we can't always get them in to the month when the activity actually occurred. So let's say February of this past year. The trustee statements that we can't get in time to turn around and give them to the city for when the city closes February. So we only have 5 months of data from our trustees. That's going to be VRF, Spur 601, and Border West Expressway. During the second quarter, the early defeasance of $3.7 million on Spur 601 took place. The board approved that in September. It happened early November, but because of the delay in that trustee activity, it's only now being reflected here. We also made our regular payment in February for Spur 601. We made payments on State Infrastructure Bank loans number 2 and number 3. Those are funded by the City of El Paso's Transportation Reinvestment Zones, also known as TRZs. As we go, we're recognizing the revenue for the Border West and streetcar. As you'll recall, we got those sums up front, and so on our financial statements, we're recording them as we receive them. Otherwise, they're listed as deferred revenue. We have work in progress of about $80 million that's related to the streetcar, and I'll highlight that several times as we go through the statements so that you can see it. And I want you to be aware, as we close out that project, all of that's going to get picked up and moved over to the city's books, but as the project's being built, it stays on our books. We've transferred 2 pieces to them: Cincinnati Street, which was an add-on to the project, and then also the maintenance and storage facility, which was completed last summer. And we talked about this during the first quarter, but the bike share is now in its own fund. It's actually an operating project now and not a capital project, so we're tracking it the way the city does through operations instead of it being in what they call an all years funds. Okay, so what I've taken is the financial statements and broken it down into smaller pieces so it's easier for you to see on the screen. So we're going to have first the assets on this page. The next page will have liabilities, and that way it's a little bit easier for you and people at home to see. So what I'd like to point out here is we have a lot of restricted cash. This is money that is spoken for, if you will. Border West, streetcar, SIB proceeds, and then the VRFs. Obviously, we drew down bonds. Those have to be spent in a certain way, and so those are separated out. And then the $80 million, right, the second to the last line, that's the work in progress for the streetcar that I wanted to point out to you. And above that's $145,000. That's the bike share assets that we have, and that's being depreciated every single year. Next up, we have liabilities. What I'd like you to focus on here is we have bonds payable and that's the footnote number 5. The footnotes match the financial statements that you have as well. We're going to be paying more debt on the Spur 601, and we're going to be paying off VRF bonds as well this year. And then below that, in the next section, you've got long-term debts payable. We've got a lot of debt. It's being funded from other sources, and so it's on our books there, but we'll reduce those liabilities as we make payments. But we've got some big sums for still remaining VRF and Spur 601. On the next page, we're going to move on to the statement of revenues, expenses, and changes in net position. This is where you can see our operating revenues. That first line of $28,000, almost $29,000, that's bike share. And for the next couple of slides, we're going to end up going out into more detail later in the presentation so you can see by fund. Again, I'm throwing a ton of information at you. I'm going to try and focus on some key things. In the middle of that, you can see most of what we've received in revenue so far this year is Border West income. That's because we're wrapping up that project. We spent about $20 million through the second quarter on that. Out of the 500 we originally received, 500 million, we spent about 20 million the first 5 months. We spent another 15 million, I believe, in February or March, and that's about the full amount of our $500 million commitment. So you'll see the remaining 15 million show up as revenue, realized revenue in the next time I'm in front of you. I think that's good for that slide. We'll move on to our operating expenses. Personnel services are up from last year. That's my fault. I cost money. Professional services of $1.5 million, that's on the projects as we're paying design and engineering firms for oversight or for design work on projects. And then towards the bottom, there's capital outlay of about $30 million. That's $20 million on the Border West, about $4 million on the streetcar that we've spent so far year to date, and $3 million each on the 2 VRF issuances, 1 and 2. And we'll see that detail, and I'll point that out to you when we go to look at it by fund. So taking from the last 2 slides, the total operating revenues and the total operating expenses, we've actually experienced a loss of almost $12 million. That's not a shock. About $4 million of that is streetcar that we're going to recognize the revenue later this year. $6 million of that is the VRFs, where we're showing about $2 million of revenue of the fee that has been collected, but we've spent out about $8 million on projects. And so that's a loss of about $6 million on paper on the VRFs, not unexpected. And the remaining amount is how the city records a principal payment for the SIB loans. But so that $12 million is nothing to worry about, and it will change. So here we can start looking at the details. This is the revenues that you saw a couple slides ago, but broken out. You can see our operating fund, we're not making a lot of money. I would point out, and Melissa, our consultant, reminded me of this yesterday, the way the city categorizes some transactions, we're receiving portions of the principal remaining on VRFs. That's actually being listed as a transfer instead of as a revenue, but that's about $56 million or $56,000 we've received year to date. That's also supporting that operating fund, and I'll point that out on a future slide. In the projects fund in the second column, you can see we've been paying for Metropia, America's Managed Lane Project, Loop 375. That's that professional services of $1.5 million. That's for design and engineering oversight, things like that. If we move over to the fourth column, it's the toll fund. Not a lot of activity, as we've not really been collecting tolls on Chavez for about 1.5 years. People still owe us some money, and we're collecting that. But once we open up Border West Expressway, you'll see more activity in that toll fund. Next column is trustees fund. That's the one where we said we've only got 5 months of activity. You can see the $2.3 million. That's the VRF income that the county has received so far this year. And then Border West and streetcar, you see the $19.8 million. We have not recognized the revenue for streetcar yet, but we will, and that'll be about $4 million more that will show up, and additional money as we spend down on that project. And then the bike share off on the side, and we've got another presentation on the bike share coming up later where I'll get into a little more detail on the revenues and expenditures year to date on that. This is detail of the expenditure slide that I showed earlier. To highlight here, I guess I would show you in that trustees fund at the bottom, you can see the capital outlay in that last row is $6 million. That's the VRF $6 million that I was talking about. And then we've paid off some debt there that's showing up as an interest expense, and that's offset by the $2 million we've collected in VRF revenue so far. And then on the Border West, you can and the streetcar fund, it's 23.9. Again, $4 million of that is streetcar that will recognize the revenue. So why is that important? On this next slide, the loss of 11.9 is really the streetcar that we haven't recognized the revenue yet. The trustees funds, that's the difference of the VRF revenues being offset by what we've spent on capital projects, and then how the city is recording principal payment in how it handles the SIB loans that are funded by the city's TRZ. So we'll go remainder of FY19. We're going to pick up that $80 million and transfer it to the city. That's what I would want you to take away from today is we've got that on our books right now. We're going to move that over to the city. We're going to complete the Border Westway construction. We're going to begin collecting tolls, in which case we'll start seeing more activity in that 7005 fund. We're going to make more payments on SPUR 601 and on the SIB loans, which are funded by the TRZ, the SPUR 601 through pass-through financing. We're working with the city. They're going to, the way they recorded the SIB on their books, they didn't like, so they're going to combine that, and then we're going to reconcile some cash because it's just not quite in the right place. And so we're working on that with the city. So I threw a ton at you. Want you to walk away with, we have $12 million loss on paper right now. That's not how it's going to end up, I promise you. Some of it is understood and planned at this point, and we're going to move about $80 million in construction work in progress over to the city at the end of the year. And with that, I would take any questions.
It's a lot of information. Any questions? Mr. Smith?
On the payments for
601, the
Yes, sir.
pass-through. Are we still on the same projected path of getting that paid off?
Yes, so we're going to pay that off early. Part of the action you took early this year for the early defeasance helped that, but we are planning on paying that earlier. Again, the amount we receive through pass-through financing exceeds the amount of the debt payment, and so what we've done is taken the additional amount and then paid off a little bit early, but we will pay that off early.
And when is that projected date?
I believe 2021, early 2021.
The bonds will actually be paid in late 2020, and we will receive one final payment from TxDOT in early 2021.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Niemer.
You show expenses that would be properly classified as administrative, which I presume is personnel, your salary included, and there's travel and such. The revenue, though, is going to change from year to year. Can you comment on the revenue that offsets those particular expenses?
Yes, so we get a BAB credit of about $215,000 that helps. We get salary reimbursements based on project agreements that we bill basically towards projects as we work. So Wynn Road just went before you, I believe, a few months ago, and it's about to begin construction. Part of built into that is a 3% fee on the cost of the project that we will bill, and that will help cover some of our administrative costs. We get portions of the VRF, the way that those deals were written. We get a piece of the outstanding on the pass-through financing of the principal remaining, and then I think 0.01% of the initial amount issued for the VRF1 and VRF2, and all of those help to offset the cost of Mr. Tejas and myself.
And what do you project?
This year,
What's
this year we will. It kind of depends on salary reimbursements. We're getting some from streetcar. How long that project continues on will impact how much we receive in salary reimbursements on that. I do project that we will lose a little bit this year. That's been kind of the standard practice as we go as the last few years. But what's going to happen is as we pay off that the Spurs 601, we're going to actually receive a pretty healthy windfall. Once we receive that last payment, that will help sustain us for several years going forward.
Okay, and so it's never a perfect balance.
No,
Every
sir.
year you've got a little excess or a little less. What if you have a little less? How does that handled?
It means we're just eating into our available cash that we've accumulated over time. So we do have money that's sitting there from earlier years
Okay.
that is available for us to dip into to cover that overture.
Okay. I would like to see this discussion as part of your presentation.
Sure, we can
so
do
that
that.
we can forecast, we're good, we're going to be able to
Yes,
cover
sir.
administrative and so forth going forward.
I believe Ms. Melendez yesterday asked that
Right.
we can drop in budget, and I'll do that for both streetcar and for our operations going forward so that you have a very clear picture of how we're performing during the year on both of those.
Okay, and then also forecasting.
Yeah, we can forecast
Right.
it. You're talking future years.
Future
We'll do
years.
that
Yeah.
during
Right.
the budget process.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think that's important so we can see our operating budget, the expenses, incoming revenue, to know where we sit as an entity, operations, as opposed to sort of this big picture. We have so many projects.
Right.
It's very complicated, and I know when the public reads that, it looks, there's all kinds of things moving back and forth on that. So it's very hard to look at that. So I would, recommend everyone just, take some time when you don't have anything else to do and just look through that. But visit with Robert, because Robert has a great way of explaining and understanding. And also, I think the narrative from our audit is very good explaining our different projects. That really tells us a lot about our history, and that, if you're ever not certain about something, go back to the comments in our audit, and that really they have a great way of explaining what we're doing and what the different revenue sources are, and our debt service as well.
So I'll bring back, for this summer, we'll do a budget in July. So we'll meet with the finance committee ahead of time. We'll do a multi-year projection on what we expect to see out of our operating fund. We'll look at the bike share as well. And then I'll include that maybe as a separate PowerPoint in future presentations, because that's just going to be a little bit different. But we can absolutely do that.
Good.
Any other questions?
When do you project the streetcar revenues are going to start coming? And you indicated a loss up there, and so.
Yes, sir. So that's just the way it's been handled since the beginning of the project.
Right.
I'm not sure why the city handles Border West one way, where we recognize the revenue
Yeah.
as we go, and then the streetcar is done separately. But what's happened in years past, through the lifetime of the construction of that project, is at the end of the year, there's a look back. It says, how much money did we spend on the streetcar? Now let's post that revenue into the system. So it probably won't be done till the end of the fiscal year. Since it's going to wrap up this year, we'll probably do it earlier when we actually transfer the asset over to the city. So we'll recognize the revenue, show that we've spent the funds that we've spent, closed out the project, and then we'll transfer it over to the city. At that point, it will wipe out that loss, and we'll transfer it over to the city.
Where it belongs.
So it could be here in the next month or two as we close it out.
Any other questions, or Mr. Parker, do you have any other questions? Thank you. You want to go ahead and take us through the investment policy, the next item?
Yes, so item 3C is our investment policy. What's happened in the past is we ask you to take the city's investment policy, and then we add another page on top of that that gives us the ability to make a few more investments that we're invested in. And so we talked about with the investment, with the Finance Committee yesterday. We are, as part of the audit, going to be reporting out on our investments going forward. The first time that will come to you is in July. When we bring the quarterly, we'll do that, the investment report, at the same time we do this financial quarterly report. But this is just asking for your approval in the investment policy. One other thing to note is we are going to name me the investment officer, or we're going to ask you to name me the investment officer at our May board meeting, and do a couple other actions that will help us get in compliance. Yes, sir?
Mr. Wardy?
I don't know if you can answer this question or not. So is there, we're not really part of the city of El Paso, and I understand why we do this, but have we ever just taken a quick look at what the state investment policy is to see which one might work better for us?
So we have not, and the reason we haven't is that the city, since the city serves as our fiscal agent, most of the activities related to our funds are handled by the city. So whatever the city is doing, we need to adopt as our investment policy, because they're taking most of those actions for us. So that's why we track theirs. Now there are remember with our funds, the majority of our funds are routed through the city of El Paso, and then we have these outside funds, which are mainly trust agreements and bond indentures and that sort of thing. Those are managed by trustees. So in those instances, this investment policy, which is the city's, covers everything that the city's doing for us. And then, as Robert mentioned, there are a couple of things within the resolution that deal with how we manage the funds that are outside of the city, and that's how we've done that. Now, we could certainly look at the state's investment policy for those trusts and arrangements that are outside of the city, but those that are managed by the city, I think, need to stay with the city's investment policy.
Well, I mean, just as a comment, and this isn't a negative to the city, but if they're acting as our fiscal agent, then they kind of need to do what we need them to do, right?
So I think that the city is pretty set in terms of how they operate. We've had trouble asking for things that are done
Okay.
differently.
Oh, you're stirring the pot.
That's what I thought.
Yes, sir.
All right, just as information, thank you.
Yes, sir.
But we could, if we wished, obtain a copy of the state's investment policy and
Certainly.
compare and contrast, could we not?
Certainly. Yeah, I can do that.
I'd be very interested in the report on that.
We'll do that.
Thank
We
you.
will do that. Yes, sir.
You should. I understand. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Stevens? None? Okay, you want to cover item number D?
Mr. Tejas?
Oh, is it Raymond, you doing that?
Yes, ma'am. Item 3D including, okay, sorry. Let me get settled here. So we're talking about the annual compliance report to TxDOT. This is required by statute, and we do this each year. Included as backup for this particular item is a resolution and the actual report as the back page. So this is a standard report. Once we file our, or I should say, once we accept our annual audit report, then we submit this compliance report to TxDOT. So it's pretty standard at this point, but subject to your questions, I would recommend approval.
So what we're looking at is a motion to approve item 3B, 3C, and 3D. So that's our financials, the investment policy, and the compliance report to TxDOT.
Well, so I would note on the financials, those are more of a report than
More of
than
reports,
asking
we
for
don't have to
action.
approve those? No
ma'am.
action on B? Okay.
That's right.
So now we're looking at just 3C and 3D.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
As one last comment, just sometimes I don't do this properly. The reason I asked that question is because in a prior life, in a political position I happened to occupy before when I was on the Public Utilities Board, we appointed somebody from the finance industry, and we made major changes to the manner in which El Paso Water Utilities managed their funds. And that was the only reason to modernize it a little bit and to take better advantage of opportunities for the funds that the water utilities was managing. That was the crux of why I brought that up, only just as information. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good point. And as you move forward as with your work in the financial management area of our investments too, you want to look at that too, Robert? I
Yes,
think.
ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. So again, we're,
Make a motion to approve all three.
Second.
okay. We're looking at two. Can you, we just need to,
C and
do you
D.
mind,
Just for two.
just for C
items
and
C and D.
C and D, can you, do you mind?
Okay, two, that's fine.
Thank you.
Amended.
Second.
Second, okay, it's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is approval of items 3, C, and D. Moving on to item number 4, presentation, discussion, and action on the following board resolutions as they relate to the El Paso County Fabens Airport, which would authorize the A, chair to execute an interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso to fund a master zoning plan. B, executive director to execute work authorization number 34 with Atkins North America, Inc., to develop said master zoning plan. And C, chair to execute an interlocal agreement with the County of El Paso for the design and construction of facility improvements, including hangars and other enhancements. Mr. Taz.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Before you, as read into the record, we do have item number 4, which deals specifically with the El Paso County Fabens Airport. We have a PowerPoint presentation, and again, though, if you'll bear with us, we're going to present it as we did the last one. I've not spoken to you all in any great detail about the Fabens Airport. So I thought before we take these items up for action, I would give you some background. And today, in fact, we have with us Sal Alonso, who you've met in prior meetings from the County of El Paso, and he's here to support, should you have any additional questions about the airport, its operations, because it is, in fact, within his department at Public Works. So today, we're going to talk about the airport itself. The County of El Paso owns and operates the airport, which is located about 14 miles east of the eastern edge of the city of El Paso city limits. It's located just north of Fabens and just south of I-10. The airport itself includes about 400 acres. As you may have heard from various media reports, the county is collaborating now with UTEP on the development of a new technology research and innovation acceleration park in and around that airport. The intent there is really to provide additional learning and innovation space for UTEP and to increase visibility and activity for the facility for the County of El Paso and its general aviation users. The county has also partnered with TxDOT recently for the creation of a business and development plan, which I believe is going to be done later this year. That will help the county guide its development and use of the facility into the future. So they're really, with this program, they've really decided to focus in on the county, on the airport again. They've made a number of improvements to date already. You can see this is a photo that was pulled from a PowerPoint that they presented to Commissioners Court not too long ago. They've had a number of enhancements, including those to the office, such as a roof repair, interior and exterior improvements, additional airport equipment, lighting, HVAC, windsocks, radios, and additional parking options as well. So now the county is looking to partner with the RMA for additional facility improvements. So what you see under items 4A, B, and C they really boil down to two specific projects. So the first one under item 4A and 4B is a master zoning plan. So as you may know, the counties in the state of Texas have very limited authority in terms of zoning. However, when it relates to an airport, the county can in fact regulate up to 30 square miles around that airport's runway. And the intention there, of course, is to prevent encroachment on current and future airport development. So that's what we're looking at there. The aerial that you see there shows in green the runway for the Fabens Airport, and in yellow is the roughly 30 square miles around that runway. So that would be the area that the county is looking to develop a zoning overlay for. The second item, or I should say the second project then that we're talking about is under 4C, and that is the design and construction of various additional improvements at the Fabens Airport. We're talking about mainly two types of improvements. One is the design of additional hangars for the airport. UTEP has, as I understand it, UTEP has taken over the main hangar at the Fabens Airport, so the county is looking at designing additional hangars for additional general aviation use. That would include vehicle and aircraft access ramps. The second component then is a need to design and construct a deceleration lane on Fabens Road. So when you're coming off of I-10 down into the airport, they want a decel lane there, and associated roadway and facility enhancements associated with that. So you'll see outlined in white are the project limits for item 4C. And in fact, this aerial actually was taken from an exhibit from item 4C. So here's a summary of the items that we're talking about and we're looking for action on today. Item 4A then is an interlocal with the county, and we're following, in fact, you may recognize the format of the interlocal agreement. It's a format that was taken from the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan program. So it's we're all very familiar with it. Item 4A is an interlocal with the county, which provides the RMA with funding for the development of a master zoning plan for the Fabens Airport. Item 4B then is the work authorization between the Regional Mobility Authority and Atkins North America, Inc. as its general engineering consultant so that Atkins can develop that master zoning plan. Item 4C then, as we touched on earlier, is an interlocal with the county, which would provide the RMA with funding so that we could develop the design for the hangars and the ramps. And then the county, I should mention also, we've divided them into two projects, really. The county's talking about the hangars and ramps, and they're also talking about the deceleration lane and associated enhancements to the roadway. They're divided into those two types of projects because we believe that the hangar design will take longer than the decel lane will. So the idea here is that we're talking about two subparts to this project where we'll do the design for the hangars, and we'll also do the design and into the construction on the deceleration lane. We believe that will be a much quicker project, so that's why it's been broken out like that. So if you notice in the exhibit under 4C, we are actually receiving funding for design of the hangars only, but design and construction of the decel lane. So that's what we're talking about. So with that in mind, then the requested board actions are included, and you could do this by single motion if you're interested, to authorize the chair to execute an interlocal agreement with the county for development of a master zoning plan. That's item 4A. 4B would be a board resolution to authorize the executive director to execute work authorization number 34 with Atkins for that master zoning plan. And then 4C authorizes the chair to execute an interlocal with the county for the design and construction of the improvements that we've touched on. So subject to your questions, that's
Mr.
all I have
Parker?
to you on this one.
As a pilot, I've flown in and out of the Fabens Airport. I've often wondered about the length and nature of the runway, the compass heading and such. Is there any study contemplated to add a crosswind runway?
I'm going to ask Mr. Sal Alonso from the County Public Works Department to address that.
Right.
Good morning. Sal Alonso from El Paso Public Works Department, Transportation Engineer. Yes, to answer your question, the current project that we have with Garver, one of our consultants, using TxDOT aviation funds, is to provide a business development plan that would identify the need of, because we are looking at extending the existing runway. I think right now we're currently at 200 linear feet. I think we need minimum 5,000 to bring in the larger aircrafts, more of the jet type of planes. But we are definitely looking into that too.
Right.
Possibly
And
either building a new
contemplating
runway
a
or
cross
extending the
runway,
existing.
too.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good. That would make the airport far more usable and utilitarian for the county.
Yes, we identified that when we first started our Pavens Airport adventure, was to identify the needs of the airport and getting some common input. Since then, like Mr. Tez has mentioned in the previous improvements that we've done at the airport, was actually providing a pilot's lounge now with a shower. We also have a FBO, or fixed base operator office, separated from the pilot's lounge, so that we're able to go in there, relax, take a shower, download information, catch up on emails, and then before he takes off. So we're looking at the entire components of the airport.
We have another airport in an adjacent county that's not necessarily in Texas yet, but that is a reliever airport for El Paso International. Is the Fabens Airport a designated reliever?
Currently, it's not, but as we move forward, we would like for the airport to be able to provide some sort of relief.
I think that would be very much to the county's advantage. I've been on a number of airport boards, and that would help the county a good deal.
That is our goal at the end of the day, is to get there eventually, to be able to. But right now, we're trying to, as part of the other improvements, we're about to do the rehab of the existing runways, restriping them. We're going to be actually providing security fencing, a new security gate up front. We're making the steps to get there. So.
Great. That'll be a good addition to the county.
Yes.
Good. Mr. Smith?
The 30 square miles, the master plan, the development of that area, you say you're letting, you're letting excuse me, you're letting a contract for that now, or you have let a contract, and if so, what is there a published vision for that as guidance to your contractor, what you want to see in that 30 square miles? Is there a target? Is there a vision?
Well, the contract that is before you, I think it's item, first one, the 8, which is the master zoning. That's the reason why we are partnering up with the CRRMA, to be able to identify that square miles, to be able to prevent, to have a zoning restrictions in that corridor, because right now there's areas abutting the airport that has been there for several years, so some of that is technically encroaching the airport, flying restrictions. So for us providing this master zoning plan, it'll provide help us prevent any future more growth trying to get developed within this stretch of the zoning. So at the end of the day, after we receive the master zoning plan, we will have more of a vision and restrictions and guidelines on that we could set forth as the county moves forward.
But isn't that the cart before the horse? Don't you have to have that horse being, what is your objective? What's your vision for that 30 square miles, so that your contractor, your design contractor?
The vision within this corridor is to give us, and again, this is something new for the county, and because the county doesn't have any zoning authority, except for the airport, this is which give us a guideline on like a guidelines and I guess a plan going forward. So as development comes in within this corridor, we could identify from not restricting buildings that are above certain elevation. So right now we don't have any guidelines. So if anybody would want to come in and start building within this area, we don't have any support behind us on restricting what development is allowed in this corridor. So with this master zoning plan, it will give us a guideline and authority to be able to prevent any type of development that would not comply with the airport.
But if the county doesn't, excuse me for going
No,
down
no,
this
go ahead.
path, because the county doesn't have any zoning authority, first off, how many owners are there of that 30 square mile area?
I don't believe at this time we have identified the number of property owners.
May I-
Majority of the property owners are, I think it would be south.
May I interject?
Sure.
Much of what you've identified in your 30 miles is university lands, is it not?
Yes, that's correct.
So the county doesn't own that,
No.
and the county, whatever the county does is subject to state approval.
Yes. And we'll be working, because we are partnering also with UTEP.
Right.
UTEP is a partner in this overall plan for the airport, so they will be assisting us dealing with the UT lands through this process.
Thank
If I
you.
could, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Carlos Gallinat, who's a planner that is being brought on board through Atkins to provide these services. So he can hopefully shed some light and make a pretty important correction.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Ray. Good morning, RMA Board, Colonel Smith, Carlos Gallinat. As Mr. Tejas mentioned, just one minor clarification. It's not 30 square miles. It's actually 3 miles. And so the way that we're looking at it, if you look at the runway, it is a mile and a half north to south from the center line of the runway, and it is 3 miles from the end of the runway. So just a clarification that it is a significant difference when you consider 30 square miles as opposed to 3 miles. And then just to elaborate, the intention here, Colonel Smith, is as Ray and Sal mentioned. So you're correct. Generally speaking, the county does not have zoning authority. However, Chapter 241 of the Texas Local Government Code does give counties zoning authorities when it relates to airports. And so the intention here is, if you could imagine, right, El Paso Airport 100 years ago, there was not much development surrounding Cielo Vista, Edgemere, those sort of areas. And so zoning comes into play in the 1950s in the city of El Paso. And so I think the intent here is the forward thinking of the county to really start to look at this, right? There's a lot of improvements happening at the airport. We expect more improvements to happen over subsequent years. And so really what the intent of the zoning master plan is to look at how do you mitigate any encroachments into a hazard area, which is that area that I just outlined, from impeding air traffic equipment, air traffic activity within that 1.5 mile, 3 mile zone of the airport. So as you start moving forward, you don't have large structures that may impede flight control or flight activity. And so that really is the intent of the study. We'll look at the property owners. There's part of the scope of work includes a very robust community outreach strategy to ensure that people are educated in what their property rights are and what might happen with this new zoning, whether it's an overlay or an outright zoning code that's put upon these properties. We still don't know. That's part of what the study will include.
And part of that, I assume it's the vision that the county has
Yes, ma'am.
along with their partner, UTEP, on what the future plans could be, can happen out there to develop that whole area.
Yes, ma'am. And my
So it's not
understanding is
just
that-
sort of the physical, but it's really a vision for the future.
Ms. Melendez, my understanding is that the county is actually currently going through a process similar to what you're describing. Again, what this additional study looks at is zoning. And so also just to clarify, when you look at zoning, Colonel Smith, and you know this, having been a developer for many years, there's many things that the government can regulate. The 3 areas that this particular study will look like is land use, the type of structures, and the height of those structures. Again, we don't know what is anticipated in mostly rural farmland areas. Probably very unlikely that you're going to have a 10-story, 20-story structure out there. You just don't know. And so again, as you start thinking about the growth and impact of the airport, you want to make sure that you have your policies in place to mitigate any subsequent impact that may have on the airport's ability to function, and more importantly, the investment that the county and others are putting into that area.
Minor clarification, you said 3 miles from the end of the runway. Do you mean from each end?
Yes, from each end. Correct, Mr. Burns.
Okay.
Well, my comment and our chair iterated that you can't go in any direction without having a vision. In other words, where you think you want to go. and to structure whatever you do as a study or whatever. Now, just in my eyes, looking at that through the eyes of someone who loves to look at future potential, the potential for that area out there is absolutely out of the ballpark.
That's right.
And so I would just love to see a very guided effort, just as a citizen, and then part of the RMA that's going to be a partner in this, that kind of takes advantage of that potential, because I think it's just tremendous potential.
Yes, sir. And part of the scope of work that we have, as Ms. Melendez included, will include some outreach, some visioning, to ensure that whatever zoning, policies are put in place coincide with whatever the vision continues to be. And to that point, Colonel Smith will make sure to reach out to you.
I'm just impressed. I think it's really, really a worthwhile effort
Yes,
that you're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions?
Just one final note. The business plan that we mentioned before, which will be done by the end of this year, Mr. Alonso has offered to come back and present the results of that, which I think would address your question
cool.
about the future vision. Okay.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alonso. So we'll entertain a motion to approve item 4,
I'd
A,
move
B, and
to
C.
approve that.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item 4 is approved. On to item number 5, discussion and action on a board resolution establishing scoring criteria and authorizing the issuance of a procurement for the selection of one or more professional engineering firms for various indefinite deliverable contracts. Mr. Tejas.
Yes, ma'am. I'm pulling up another PowerPoint. You may recall this item came before the board. Okay, here we go. Back in February, our last meeting, the County of El Paso and the Regional Mobility Authority agreed to enter into an interlocal agreement whereby the County of El Paso would provide funding and the RMA would then complete a procurement for indefinite deliverable contracts. In essence, what we're talking about here is on-call contracts for professional engineering services. So we're back to you today with an action item that I mentioned back in February. We're going to talk about the program background and goals, the proposed scoring criteria, an estimated timeline, and then requested board action. Back in 2015, as you may recall, the board selected 4 professional engineering firms to provide those indefinite deliverable contracts on an as-needed basis. That was done mainly to support, I should say, the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. In fact, through that program, we've issued 10 separate contracts on individual projects, totaling about just shy of $17 million in engineering services. So it was a very productive indefinite deliverables contracts program, an IDC program, that, of course, was geared towards the 2013 CMP. The next procurement, the one we're talking about today, then, will not likely be quite as large. Unfortunately, we don't have a established funding source like we did with the vehicle registration fees, but we have identified several projects that we are intending to use this program for. But we're seeking to replicate the success of that 2015 IDC program with a new selection of up to 4 additional engineering firms. Just like we did in 2015, once the board makes a selection for those 4 firms, we intend to execute a master agreement with each of those firms, and then as individual projects come online, we will issue individual work authorizations. Both the master agreements and the work authorizations, as always, will come to the board for review and approval before we begin those projects. As I mentioned, the work authorizations then, let me back it up. The master agreements include all of the boilerplate and all of the terms and conditions that you would normally see in an engineering agreement. Once the work authorization and the task and the specific project is developed, then those project details would be rolled into the work authorization. And this process, of course, expedites the CRRMA's ability to respond to a request for a design and the development of a project. So it's a good way to be ready for projects and funding when it becomes available. As we've seen over the years, as you may recall, projects can fall out of the sky into your lap, and you need to be able to respond very quickly. So that's the intent of this IDC program. As I mentioned, the board authorized the execution of the interlocal with the county at the February 2019 board meeting. Per that interlocal, the county, as I mentioned, is providing the funds necessary for the program, and we will provide the engineering services as requested. Now, although the county is providing the funds, this IDC program we will be able to use it for additional projects as well, not just county-funded projects. So it's a great partnership that we've developed here with the county. We have begun work on the procurement in accordance with the interlocal that was approved back in February. And now what I have before you is the proposed scoring criteria for your review. This scoring criteria, as you know, as you may recall, with all of our procurements, I always bring back to you the proposed scoring criteria for that particular procurement. And that's what you see before you today. This procurement criteria should look very similar, or should look very familiar to you. It is the exact same criteria that we used back in 2015. We felt that it worked well in 2015, and nothing has changed significantly to require us to reevaluate these numbers. What we're looking at doing here is providing 30%, and it'll likely be out of 100 points. So this would be 30 points for team organization, staffing, and disadvantaged business entity processes. We've got 25 points at the past project experience, and project understanding and approach is at 35%, and project schedule would be at 10%. The way that this procurement will be rolled out, it will be the same as the 2015, where we will have a sample project that will be included in the procurement, and the teams will be reviewing and providing their experience as it relates to the proposed project. That proposed project will be a roadway project that is similar to many of the projects that we've developed in the past. So those are the proposed scoring criteria. Here's the estimated timeline. Of course, this is subject to change, but this is what we're shooting for. It's a very aggressive timeline, but we believe we can make it. In February, the interlocal was approved by the RMA. By March, the interlocal was approved by the county. It has been executed. In April, I'm looking to you today, actually, to approve the scoring criteria and authorize the issuance of that procurement. By late this month, we intend to issue the procurement. It'll be on the street. By sometime in May, late May, likely, mid to late May, the proposals will be due. And of course, as with all of our procurements, we will have a Q&A process in there as well. So the interested parties will submit questions. We will provide answers within a week, and they'll still have at least a week or so, perhaps more, to provide responses to those, or to incorporate those responses into their proposal. By June, we're hoping to be back to the board for the selection of the IDC teams. July and August, we will be negotiating and hopefully bringing to the board master agreements for execution. So that means we would be ready to issue a work authorization as early as August or September of 2019. So again, that's a very aggressive timeline, but we think we can make it. So the requested board action then today is a motion to approve the board resolution to adopt the selection criteria and scoring presented, and authorize the executive director to issue a procurement for indefinite deliverable contracts. Subject to your questions, I would recommend approval.
Mr. Morty?
What we don't cover in here, Raymond, just respectfully, is, are you selecting a committee to evaluate, and who's on the committee, and who determines the qualifications of the people selected to the committee?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
Did you review that? That's all right.
Yes, in fact, we have. So we've reached out to our partners. We are going with the entities that normally receive our design services. So if you go back in time, those folks that have used us for design include TxDOT, include the City of El Paso, and the County of El Paso. So we have representatives from each of those entities on the selection committee. So that committee then, and thank you for this, I meant to explain this in a little more detail. The scoring criteria will be established within the procurement. Then when the proposals come in, the proposals will be distributed to an individual from TxDOT, from the county, and from the City of El Paso. And they will be provided a scoring sheet that links back to the scoring criteria that you approved today. So it is an evaluation committee, and then those scores will be brought back to the board with a recommendation for approval from that selection committee.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good question.
Mr. Smith?
That was my question exactly, worded much better than I could. But is there any kind, or are we the independent verification of the criteria used and what that committee comes up with for a recommendation? And are you as staff involved in that process?
Yes, sir. So I oversee the process, but I'm not involved in the evaluation process. And that's been not necessarily by policy, but by practice. We've done that since day one. I don't know that I've ever been involved in the evaluation side of a procurement, because at the end of this, I will be the main person involved with those selected.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what we do instead is we rely on our general engineering consultant to serve as subject matter experts. So if the selection committee has any questions, those questions would be discussed with our general engineering consultant and then routed to me, and then I can present them to the proposers if there are any. So I'm the point of contact for the proposers, but we use subject matter experts to support the selection committee. Now, the selection committee to date, the individuals that have been proposed are each professional engineers, so they will individually have their profession supporting them as well.
But the subject matter expert is going to evaluate these. Aren't they one of the applicants as well?
No, the GEC cannot
Okay.
submit
No,
on this, and the GEC will not be doing any evaluation either. They will simply be supporting the evaluation committee.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions?
Madam
Mr. Neiman?
Madam Chair. Mr. Tage, I understood you to say since 2015 there have been 10 IDC projects for a total of 17 million.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So those seem like big projects, and maybe there's one or two that overwhelms. To do as an IDC rather than going out for bid. Could you speak to that?
Sure. And in fact, I can share with you the breakdown of each of those individual projects. Some, of course, were larger than others. However, this isn't in lieu of a bid. This is a bid. So this is the way that we intend to do this. So the way that it was outlined in 2015, which is the same process that we're using today, is that we inform all of those entities that are interested in doing work with the RMA in the coming term, as in terms of professional engineering services. We're letting you know, if you're interested in doing any work with us, join this on-call process. So that's known ahead of time. I'm trying to think of any scenarios where we went and did a project-specific procurement since 2015, and I'm not thinking of one. This is really intended to serve as that bid, that procurement process for that.
Okay.
I'm not sure that I answered your question, other than to say.
My question is, these are big jobs. 17, that's $1.7 million per job on average.
Yes, sir.
And so I think of IDC as being time and materials. And, and I know it's more complicated than that, but.
Yes, sir. And perhaps I should steer clear of IDC and instead use on-call. It's a fairly common program. The city of El Paso has one. They call them, I believe they also go by the name of evergreen contracts. In essence, you've gone out, in the procurement, you'll have a whole list of pre-approvals in the different types of disciplines. So it's pretty robust. I don't want you to come away thinking it's a very quick process or anything.
It's driven by short time fuse projects. Is that correct? These are projects, if you had more time, you'd put it out for general bid.
Not necessarily, right? Because
Really?
while that's certainly a positive, and that's something that has helped us in the past when a project lands in our lap and we have to do the design. For example, Spur 1966 at UTEP. That project, TxDOT needed to design it. They didn't have any capacity. They came to us, and we had somebody on board. In fact, we used our general engineering consultant team to do that because we didn't have an IDC program in place. Having an IDC program in place allows us to use other firms, not necessarily our general engineering consultant, to handle those quick projects. But that's not the sole role of this program. The program is really to have the procurement completed in advance, so that when any time a project comes up, we can route it through to the IDC team, the list.
Any other questions?
So maybe one final point on that. The times that we do go out with a specific procurement on a specific project really relates to the type of project that it is. So when we look at the streetcar project and we went out for design or construction on those, that's such a unique style of project that we would probably put out a specific procurement for that, because the teams that are looking to design a streetcar or redesign a streetcar vehicle would not normally apply on a general IDC like this.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's a narrow tailored project, then we would go out for a specific procurement in that case.
Okay.
So I hope that helps.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Item number 5 is approved. Moving on to item number 6, discussion and action to authorize the chair to execute a First Amendment to the interlocal agreement for project reimbursements with the City of El Paso for the El Paso streetcar project. Mr. Tess.
Yes, ma'am. As read into the record, this is an amendment to an existing interlocal that we have with the City of El Paso. This particular agreement, the original underlying agreement, was where the city and the RMA agreed to certain reimbursements. As you may recall, there were certain scenarios where the City of El Paso wanted to incorporate the payment processes, the fare boxes into the streetcar, so they provided that equipment to us. There were other scenarios where it was quicker at the time during the project development for Sun Metro to relocate certain streetcars. So we asked them to do that with the intention that we would reimburse them later. So this agreement is really a type of cleanup for the project. But what you have today before you is actually an amendment to that original agreement, whereby we provided the funding for the City of El Paso to launch the streetcar project. So as you may recall, the intention from the beginning of the project was that the RMA would handle the launch event. However, the city expedited the launch and wanted to meet a certain date. We weren't certain that we were working furiously with the state safety officer. We weren't sure we were going to make that date. The city then offered to take over the launch event, and we allowed them, or we agreed to do that with them, with the agreement that we would bring back funding for them. So we would provide that funding for them. So what you see before you is item number 6. Then is that First Amendment to the interlocal, which allows us to provide them reimbursements for the launch event expenses. Subject to your questions, I would recommend approval on this item.
Any questions?
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Thank you. Item number 6 has been approved. So item number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute an amendment to the local transportation project advance funding agreement with the Texas Department of Transportation for the Pelicano Road project. Mr. Taz.
Yes, ma'am. This item is also an amendment with, this one is with TxDOT on the local project advance funding agreement. This project, as you may recall, is within the 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan. We are working with the county on this particular project. This one also includes not only vehicle registration fee dollars, but also federal funds, and which means that we've got to go through an agreement with TxDOT. That accounts for the local project advance funding agreement. However, on this one, the County of El Paso went back to the MPO and requested additional funding to improve the roadway from asphalt to concrete. The MPO has approved, and that freed up an additional $5 million. Therefore, we have to go back into the local project advance funding agreement and amend it to include the additional $5 million. So subject to your questions, I would recommend approval on this one, and I believe Mr. Alonso's here as well, should you have any questions on the project itself.
Questions?
Motion to approve?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item 7's been approved. Item number 8, presentation, update, and discussion on change orders recently approved by the Executive Director for the following programs or projects. A, 2013 El Paso County Comprehensive Mobility Plan, and B, El Paso Streetcar Project.
This morning we have with us Edgar Fino from our general engineering consultant team. He's going to present on the change orders from the Comprehensive Mobility Plan program, which is under item 8A. Item 8B will have Gil Gardner, also part of our general engineering consultant team. He's going to present on the streetcar project, but on that one, we're actually going to do an update along with the change orders. So with that, Mr. Fino will present this item.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Edgar Fino with the GEC. PowerPoint presentation. All right, this is the El Paso CMP recent change orders. There's 4 change orders in regards, well, there's 4 projects that I will be presenting change orders to in this presentation. The first project is the East Lake Phase 1 that's currently under construction. This is the third change order, which is the water meter fees for $1,000 that has been approved and executed during the change order process. The second project is the old Waco Tanks Road or the Nuevo Waco Tanks Road. Change orders 1 through 7 on this slide have been approved by the board. Change order 14 and 15. As per the request from TxDOT, these 2 change orders were voided. They were not necessary, and they were, what we did with TxDOT's request on change order 14 and 15 is we combined them to create change order number 17. That was TxDOT's request. The change order number 17 was for additional paving, surface prep, striping, and extra time to complete this work. The change order amount was $26,857.92. And then the change order number 18 is also being presented today as far as the concrete header repair. That change order was $15,377.79. The next project that's ongoing is the Vista del Sol project. And change orders 1 through 6 have been presented to the board, and also change orders 7 through 11. And I'm here to present change order number 13 as far as installing temporary and permanent chain link fence in lieu of the existing wooden fence. The change order used for under VRF funds was $24,546.86. And also change order number 14 as far as relocate the soil material due to temporary easement expiration date. And that change order amount was $6,125.01. And that one also used the VRF funds. The next project is Rojas Drive. Change orders 1, 2, and 3 have been presented to the board. The same thing with change orders 4 and 5. And I'm here to present change order number 7, which was the addition of silt fence installation, salvaging the value of the temporary silt fence stakes, install type 3 barricades, and a backfill due to water hydrant erosion. The change order amount was $6,667.19. And that concludes all the change orders that need to be presented to the board. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Fino? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'll give me a moment, I'll bring up the next PowerPoint.
Good morning. I'm Gil
Morning.
Gardner, the construction manager and program manager for the El Paso streetcar system. On one of my, perhaps even close to the very final presentation. I think we may have one or two more.
You've been
But
saying
what-
that, Mr. Hardin, a few times. I think we've heard that before, but we're always glad to see you.
Well, before I start, I would like to say something about this. This, first of all, has been really an enjoyable program. The CRRMA board and executive director have been an outstanding group to work for. People in my industry said, "You mean we brought this thing in within budget and within schedule?" And I said, "Yeah, we did." And they said, "How did you do it? Did you have some secret?" I said, "Yes, I did." And they said, "What was the secret?" I said, "I had an outstanding board that kept me on my toes, made certain that I didn't spend any money that I didn't have. I had an executive director and a finance director who made certain that I knew where I was at all times." So you can actually thank yourself and applaud yourself for the diligence, the due diligence that you guys did in getting this project. This is one of the few projects that we've worked on where we have money left over that we're trying to do something with. So with that, I'd like to get started. I can see it up here. Here we are. All right, I'm going to cover 5 items today. Project progress, where we are, the highlights. I want a new item, which is the SCADA system, which I'll go over very shortly. Raymond will work with me on it. And then a change order summary for one little cleanup change order that we have. We'll go over that one. And then I'll, have any questions. On the project progress, the percentage of complete. As Raymond said earlier, this project, or I think it was Robert said earlier, the MSF building is 100% done and has been turned over and accepted by the city. The civil and track work is 100% done. The water and sewer is 100% done. The storm drain is actually 99.994% done, floating in water. We're just having to get it through the storm drain people with their new camera system. But we're working on it. The contractor is. We expect it to be done shortly, which will then complete the total infrastructure. The Father Rom improvements are 100% done. They've been accepted. We are anticipating an acceptance letter on that one very shortly for CBD4. And we do have an acceptance letter on Cincinnati improvements, which is also 100% done. The vehicles are 97% done. Now let me kind of explain where the 97% is shortly here. The project highlights are currently in revenue service. The project is completed its first quarter of service. We processed the cleanup change order, which was change order 50, which the board acted on a month or so ago. We've received ADA certification. I'd like to point out on our ADA certification that of all of the ADA ramps and ADA issues over the 4.8 miles of the project, we had 2 locations that did not meet Julie's very, very stringent requirements. One of the locations, a contractor looked at it and said, "Yes, you looked at it. It was our mistake. We fixed it. We'll fix it." They took care of it. The other one, I'll discuss it, was a little minor cleanup we have to do on a change order. They've already addressed it. Julie is certified on it, so we do have our ADA certification. That has been signed by the city. The contractor has addressed their final punch list items with the exception of the storm drain system. There are 2 or 3, they keep coming back with additional views of their camera. We keep, addressing them and then, not ignoring them, but saying, "That's nice, but we're not going to do it." But they keep coming. We hope to close that out. On the vehicles, all of the vehicles have been conditionally accepted. Sun Metro is in receipt of all of the operational spares and supplies, with the exception of spare truck number 2, which is shipping from Brookville very soon. Sun Metro has taken delivery, and this is the interesting part, of all of the salvaged PCC streetcar parts that were removed during the rehabilitation process, but weren't used. And they are now stored at the Cotton Street, the old streetcar barn. They're now stored there, and they've been turned over to the city. The city, as an aside, is in the process of bringing aboard an appraiser to put a price on that so they have a value. What's left to complete? We want to close out and transfer the documentation for the city of El Paso and the TxDOT SSO. Most of those documentation has been closed out. We're just finalizing the last of it. We're going to deliver a final set of civil and track work out drawings, resubmittal to City of El Paso. They had a few questions. We're resubmitting those. Review and complete the El Paso Water Utility Storm Drain Punch List, which I've discussed, and then complete final acceptance of infrastructural and vehicle assets with the City of El Paso. We expect to have all of that done by when? Hopefully,
I don't know that we have a date on that, but we're actually very close on most of those, so
yeah.
soon.
That's the reason I didn't want to give a date. Anyway, we're very, very close on it. Then one item here on that is we want to procure SCADA instead of an owner-issued change order. And with that, I'd like for Raymond, you want to discuss that?
So I'll touch on it, then the next slides
Okay.
I'll ask you to go through because they're the technical
All right.
details on it. But I did want to touch on this item. We've been coming back to you for a couple of months now, talking about how we had some funds left over and we were going to develop some owner-initiated change orders for the use of those remaining grant funds. What we did is we sat down with Sun Metro to identify what they would most benefit from in terms of the use of those funds. We initially had a very long wish list, and we went through that wish list with Sun Metro at some length. We pulled some items out, we developed some of those items, we issued some change orders for some of those items. But really the next thing that they wanted was a SCADA system, and Gil will explain what that is. But a SCADA system is actually, depending upon the type of system that you develop and the type of system that you implement, it could be a very expensive endeavor. So in effect, what we've done is when Sun Metro identified SCADA as the next step, we put that out to our contractor, Paso Norte Track Works. When they came back with a proposal, it was extremely high, but worse than that, the timing there was a really long delay period before they could actually even begin work on the SCADA system. So instead, what we're looking at now is potentially putting this out as a separate procurement for a SCADA system in component parts so that we could kind of mix and match with the remaining funds available. So I wanted to spend a moment to explain that to you all, because for quite some time I've been telling you we're coming back with owner-initiated change orders. This is a little bit of a different path forward, but I wanted to give you that backup. So with that, I'd ask Gil if you could speak to the SCADA system itself.
Okay. All right. If I could have that here. The SCADA is a supervisory control and data acquisition system. It's used to uses software controllers, sensors, and computers to control and monitor the electrical equipment remotely, the communications equipment remotely, and the whole system remotely. And it's a common way for rail and transit systems and agencies to help or deal with safety and operations. Now before I go any further, let me give you a little background on why this system didn't have a SCADA system to start with. When the system was first designed and they looked at it, they said, we want to put in a bare bones system. And we have a limited amount of funds to put in, and it's a fairly small system, so some of the stuff we will do without would be such things as train control and a SCADA system. Now, that was an appropriate decision at the time that was made and accepted. When we finished up the project, we discovered we did have additional funds left. And we sat down and determined what would be the best use of those funds. I mean, there are many things that we could do. Well, one of the biggest things would be to address, rather than look at some of the esoteric, the landscaping and the architectural issues, that we focus on safety, something that the system could have and need. And that was the approach, and that was also based upon what the operator wanted, this Sun Metro wanted, was some safety. So we identified the SCADA. Now, the interesting part about it is, had they put the SCADA in the first place, they would have probably done it, shall we say, the old-fashioned way, which is what I'm used to, which would be to run an independent fiber optic cable the full length of the system. And that would have been an in-ground cost for them to use. Well, what they've discovered over the last several years, and I'm going to go over here in just a second, is that you really don't have to do that. You can work with the local public utilities, the local spectrum system, draw off of their fiber optic system, and provide the same service for a lot less cost, upfront cost. This is a system that's being used currently under the Tucson streetcar system, Oklahoma City streetcar, MARTA in Atlanta, and the DART in Dallas. So it's not a system that we've just thought up and, hey, we'd like to try to use this. We never used it before. They're looking at something that has been done before and successfully. What's the benefits of SCADA? It'll provide Sun Metro a way of monitoring and controlling the status of the electrical equipment from a computer, from their operations center. In other words, a substation loses power, Sun Metro can see and possibly fix it from a computer right there at the MSF. More importantly, if for some reason that substation needs to be shut off, maybe, heaven forbid, somebody runs into a, OCS power line, the substation needs to be shut off. They can do it remotely instead of having to go out there and manually shut off the substation. It'll provide a network for equipment to communicate and give status upgrades, and then improves the safety and efficiency. It will also assist Sun Metro in the train control system at all of the signals there. It ties all of that into it. So what we're doing right now is developing the documents for a possible procurement for a SCADA system. We hope to have this done within the next couple of weeks. And while the initial plan was for an owner-initiated change, the quote was too expensive. We feel that we can do it much cheaper, also better to control, and it also would allow RMA to close out the contract with PD&T and let them go home, you might say. Any SCADA improvement, procurement, would return to the board for review and input. That's all on SCADA. I got one more item, which is change order 52, and then I'll, address any questions. We do have one minor change order that we went through here, included of two items. One of them was a repair of a damaged handrail down at the station, the streetcar stop at Father Ram and Santa Fe. It was payment of $3,046.03 to reimburse the contractor for the repair of the handrail. It was unclear as to who caused the damage, so we couldn't really go back to someone else. And this change order just reimburses a contractor for damage for the repairs. The other item is a sidewalk ADA ramp modification in Stanton in Arizona. This is one of two that Julie picked up that we had to do. That was for a cost of $4,520.29 for the removal and replacement of a ramp. The ramp was installed in accordance with our inspector's direction to the contractor. Our inspector gave the direction to the contractor. subsequent measures by Julie determined that the cross slope did not quite meet the ADA requirements. And so what we had to do is the contractor had to come in, remove the concrete, the sidewalk, and relay the sidewalk there so the cross slope did meet the requirements. That was, as I said, one of two. The other one, the contractor took care of themselves. So the total amount of that change order was $7,566, which brought the total cost of change orders, the 51 change orders, to $9,885,022. Total cost of all change orders that was through 51 for 52 is $9,892,588. Okay, any questions?
Mr. Wardy?
Yes, sir.
This one goes to Mr. Tejas. Okay, first question, how much money do we have left over? And how much is this little toy that Sun Metro is on their wish list?
The answer to how much is the toy, that's unknown right now. In fact, the way that we will be developing the procurement will be in separate subparts. So in the event that we can get everything that they want for the remaining budget, it'd be great. I doubt it though, so we'll have to cut back and select the pieces that we want. The remaining funds are a little bit in excess of $400,000.
Oh, okay. And do you have any idea what their quote went out for the standalone system?
The problem with that one is that it wasn't broken out into component parts, so we couldn't pick and choose. But again, the timeline was just way off. But that one was in excess of $700,000 for the full SCADA system. Now I think we'll end up with something less than the full, but something definitely usable.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
You had indicated that they opted out of the owner-initiated system and are having us go about it, and explain that to me?
Sure, certainly. So what I was referring to was an owner-initiated change order. That's just a fancy way of saying a change order that we're requesting that isn't required by either unforeseen conditions or something along those lines, or someone's error. An owner-initiated change order it usually comes in for a preference. If you like a different color of paint than was originally proposed and you change it later, that's termed an owner-initiated change order. So what I was referring to was that for several meetings past, I've been saying we will come back with owner-initiated change orders in order to spend down the remaining grant funds. So the difference now is that instead of doing an owner-initiated change order with our current contractor, Paso Norte Track Works, we're actually going to put this component out on the street and select a new contractor to provide that work. That's the distinction I was trying to make.
And the user buying their own control system isn't better than us doing it for them? Or?
Well, we're working with Sun Metro, just like we built the system for them, handed it over, we're doing the same thing. Since the funds are in our names, in the name of the
Okay.
Regional Mobility Authority, we have to do the procurement.
Got it.
We won't, just to be clear, we won't provide them anything they don't want or ask for.
Okay,
Yes,
got
sir.
it.
Mr. Wardy?
Just for the record, I think it's really haphazard to skimp on a safety system instead of one of those expensive rebuild cars. I don't think this is an optional item. You know, just as a citizen, it's not my place. It's not our place to make those decisions. That gives me tremendous concern on how, not us, how they went about detecting. It's like building an airliner, but we're not going to put these two safety systems, so we'll just build an extra plane by not doing it. I think that should be of concern to the citizens of El Paso that was done, but it's just my comment. It's safety's first always, especially when this is a governmental entity, and we are tasked. The city's task is to provide for the safety and security of its citizens. So just comment. Thank you.
I hope I'm not stepping into a web here, but the current Sun Metro streetcar team, and I'm going to make it clear on that. That was one of the first items that they identified. They said, I have a wish list. That they've had that on their wish list since day one, that they would like to have a safety system. They identified a safety certification program that was very, very high, and stuff like this. I don't know that it was necessarily the fault of the city initially whenever they did the design and the proposal. I think it was because they were working at the time. These are people who did not have experience in running a transit system and know what some of the safety issues are that have to be addressed. As we came aboard, and then as their team came aboard, we all were actually speaking the same language, going from the same page and working together. And we've always tried to keep a little bit of money available to address those specific items. So it hadn't been a question that, oh, they just came up with it, they discovered it. Carl Jackson's been hounding me on safety since day one, since he first came aboard. So.
But this process that we're going through will at least give us a dollar amount of what the system would cost, and so maybe any additional funding in order to not do it, halfway could possibly come from the city if they choose to do that.
Certainly.
But it gives us at least a point of here's what it's going to cost to have a full safety system.
Let me clarify a couple of items here on, shall we say, the SCADA system itself. The SCADA system handles both communications and safety type element. The core element of it will be the safety aspects of it. Those will be the items that we're going to take care of first. That our designers feel comfortable that they'll be able to do, and we should be able to get prices within the budget. They're pretty comfortable about that. They're not quite so comfortable about, Carl would like to have the nice to do things where he can adjust the signal timing and, and stuff. That's more operational. But what we want to do is make certain that we come up with a platform, and that's what they're focused on, a platform that would allow them to add that on later if they so wanted to without having to redesign something. So that's what we're trying to do, is to give them where they can add stuff on later. But the key element will be to take care of the safety elements. And that's what our focus of the excess funds are.
And we assume that will probably come in within our budget, our allowable budget.
Yeah.
Okay. And we don't need to take any action on this. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garden. It's always great to see you. Item number 9, presentation and discussion on the following fiscal year 2019 second quarter performance reports. A, El Paso Bike Share Program. B, General Engineering Consultant Team's use of local resources. Mr. Tez?
Yes, ma'am. You'll notice today we are transitioning streetcar reporting, our quarterly reports, to Robert. So, sorry, Bike Share. I can't do two things at once.
Welcome to the club.
Okay, so Mr. Studer will provide this quarterly report.
Good morning, Robert Suter, Director of Finance, Camino Real RMA. As Mr. Tejas said, I'm going to take over reporting, and hearing your comments earlier on the fiscal year or the second quarter report, I'll include some budget numbers with this when we come back in the third quarter. This is a slide that you've seen before. It's got data from the first 3 years of the operations and then the first 2 quarters of this fiscal year. As you can see in the rides taken in that first row, we saw a significant decrease during the second quarter. This is not unexpected, and I'll show you that in a later graph. The weather really drives a lot of our usage. When it's cold outside, people don't want to ride the bikes around, and so the second quarter includes December, January, and February, and that's historically our worst quarter. We're pretty close to right in line with where we've been overall in the current fiscal year, but we did see a sizable decrease. If I could direct your attention to the very bottom right cell, we passed 10 million calories burned. I could use a few more of those, so I'm going to get out and ride as the weather improves, but we have exceeded 10 million calories burned since the lifetime of, or since the inception of the program. I thought that was a cool milestone for us to pass. Saturday and Sunday remain our busiest times for riders. between 7 and 10. We're seeing a little bit more in the afternoons, but it's definitely an evening activity. I think it's a very social activity. San Jacinto remains by far the most used station. It has about 40% of the overall checkouts. So out of the 16 stations, about 40% of the rides that start begin at San Jacinto. Next most popular is about 20%, and that's Pioneer Plaza. Unfortunately, we've seen some reduced activity there as all of the construction around that. It's a little bit harder to get to, and so that's one of the things that caused that underperformance during the second quarter. We saw some station improvements at Madeline and Kern Place. With those new stations are performing very well, and so we're going to continue monitoring that. But that's been a very positive development. Again, as our overall rides are not very high during the second quarter, the special rides also don't exist. We don't get a lot of other organizations that come to us and say, "Hey, can you do a ride for us?" So really, there was just Get Ready for Finals event with UTEP Engineering, and then some additional promotional work done by Cesar and his team during Winterfest. This is a overall activity summary. A lot of this was used to build that first slide and the data there, but this is exclusive to the second quarter. So you can see we had 1,600 trips last year during the second quarter. Again, December, January, February, we had 2,000. So it's a 20% decrease that we saw. Almost all of that is attributable to Pioneer Plaza and it being down. It's just a little bit of a struggle with all the construction around that. I don't know if you can see it very well on the screen. I'll use the mouse to try and highlight it. This right here is Christmas Day. We had over 100 trips on Christmas Day, and in speaking with Cesar, that happens every single year, just kind of a unique thing, but it's the busiest day that we experience during that quarter. As I guess people come downtown and are looking for something to do. A lot of businesses are closed. People need some kind of activity, and they come down and ride. I thought that was pretty cool. Below, you can see that most rides take place between 2 and 30 minutes, and then 30 and 60 minutes. I wish I could take credit for this 300-minute ride out here. I'm wondering if somebody didn't lock back in the bike, and so it calculated that on them. But yeah, that was kind of a unique thing. Here's the activity by day of the week on the top, and then time on the bottom. On the top, you can see that Sunday is very popular, and then on Saturday, that's by far the most popular. About 400 of the 1,600 trips were taken on Saturdays. Of note, we don't have a lot of members, but the members we do have, they're in red, and you can see they're riding more consistently Monday through Thursday than they are on any other day of the week, and I thought that was interesting. Below, again, the lines are very light. We'll see if we can improve that going forward, but what it really shows is times for people riding are between 7 and 10 p.m., and we've known that since the beginning. We have very social riders that come down here for dates or whatever. I was at the baseball game Saturday and saw people riding on the bikes, and that's obviously when people are using
Bar
it.
hopping.
So as I mentioned earlier, ridership decreased this December through February, 20% from last year, 2,000 rides to 1,600 rides, largely due to Pioneer. We have experienced some growth. Some stations actually improved. One is Kern, the UTEP Academic Services Building, the County Courthouse, Oregon University, and Cleveland Square. All of those saw the ridership increase. They don't have a lot of ridership, so it's not enough to offset what we've lost at Pioneer, but it is a positive development. And again, we're really proud of Kern and the activity that it's seeing. Going to hit you again with Pioneer. Its ridership decreased 68% from last December to February to this year. And then when you add the first quarter, which outperformed this year, and the second quarter that underperformed, we're down about 5% from where we were at the same time last year on rides. It's about 250 rides that we're trailing last year by. So this, I wanted to give you an idea. We're not even throughout the entire year. As you can see here, September and October usually are okay. And when you see November through February, things really slow down. The yellow is where we are in FY19. This light purple is FY18, and we're right next to that. As note, in FY16, we didn't have the full system up and running during this time period, but we're at about 6,000 rides. This year, we're about 5,200. Last year, 5,500. But we will see it take off and hopefully finish up there in the 16,000 to 18,000 rides as we go throughout the remaining 6 months. So we will see a lot more activity this summer, and that's to be expected. This is how it trends. And then this is something that you've seen every single, I think, report. The second to last row is the second quarter. We've only made $8,600 in revenues so far. That's right in line with where we were last year, basically a little bit below that. And our expenses are pretty standard month to month at about $16,000 a month. So we will see that pick up. Hopefully the ridership our expenses are fixed, our ridership will help bring in more revenue. And with that, I will take any questions.
Well, Mr. Studer, I will tell you, and I've talked to Raymond about this before, is that the hope is that we can make this a sustainable program. So we've talked several times about promoting the stations and bikes. I mean, there's a lot of promotional opportunities there, and that's really hopefully will help us assured that this program will sustain. It's a fantastic program, and it also gives our community opportunities to highlight their businesses and festivals and so forth. So I would encourage you to continue to pursue that, because I do think it's a way for us to maintain this program, which I think adds a great element of quality of life for our citizens. So please pursue that aggressively.
So I'd like to make two comments based on your comments. Mr. Martinez is with us today, and he and I are meeting tomorrow. I've built a list of potential sponsors that we're going to ask him to go out and start visiting, so we can get some of that sponsorship money to help support the program.
Wouldn't you like to see some banks
yeah, so
sponsor
United
our
Bank
station?
is on the list. Western Heritage Bank is on the list. So yeah, we'll be doing our due diligence there. You mentioned festivals. So one thing that may help us this year is that the Sun City Music Festival, what is it? Neon Desert is moving its location. In years past, it blocked off San Jacinto, our most popular station, for several days on a weekend when a lot of people are in town. They're moving to be closer to this area, and so we're hoping to see increased activity during that time, and I'm sure Caesar and his group will be out there promoting it, but that would free up our most popular station for rides again during that busy weekend.
Mr. Morty?
I think, first of all, let me preface my comment. I think it's a great program. But my concern is, I don't know, we maybe have to do an about face on the way we're going forward, because if you do a conservative trend analysis, we're going to burn through our cash, and at some point we have to replace the bikes. They wear out. Okay, so I think it calls for some drastic measures.
Yes, that sponsorship program, we have to succeed in getting some sponsors for individual stations, a title sponsor for the entire thing. We're talking about doing some, maybe using, there's one blue bike, the rest of our fleet is red, and so maybe using a unicorn bike to try and generate some things. Growing membership would help. We've spent a lot of time talking about that in the last couple of months because we don't have a lot of runway left.
Is there grant money available, or we should explore that anyway?
That was
Because
my
it's a
question.
health, maybe the Health Foundation might consider, because there's lots of great factors that we can promote, and maybe some grant money and so forth. So
We absolutely will pursue that.
yeah, because it's a great program, but we don't want it to die. So let's be aggressive about trying to make sure this program is sustainable.
And like I said, Mr. Martinez will be visiting Western Heritage Bank and United Bank. So.
Okay. Terrific.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Studer. Is Mr. Fino?
Yes, ma'am. We have one more presentation. Thank you for bearing with us as we work through these technical issues. All of these PowerPoints, all of these presentations were provided to you in advance, and they will be up online after this meeting. So if you want to spend some time with them, you're certainly welcome to. This is the last item. This is use of local resources, and Mr. Ed Grafino from our General Engineering Consultant team will be presenting on this item. There we go.
Thank you, Raymond. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Ed Grafino with the GC. I will, PowerPoint presentation. I will be providing information as far as the GC team resources. The agenda items are labor expenditures, graphical representation, firm summary, and any questions you may have. The first slide is our quarterly summary. For 2019, quarter 41, we only have information up to February. The local labor is at 92%, and the non-local labor is at 8%, and I will be going over that on the next slide. The quarterly summary, as far as the line information, as far as the line chart, local quarterlies at 92%, non-local is at 8%. The bar chart, the gold bar is for local labor at $261,893.05. And the purple bar is the non-local labor at $21,467.91. On the yearly average, on the line graph, the local quarterly, again, is at 92%. Cumulative, as far as the overall program, is the orange bar, and that's at 61%. I mean, the orange line, and that's at 61%. And for the 2019, it's the same numbers for February. As far as local labor, $261,893.05. And the purple bar is $21,467.91. And the last slide is the firm summary as far as the total dollar amounts for all the firms involved as a GEC. That concludes my presentation, if there's any questions.
Any comments or questions for Mr. Fino? Thank you very much.
Right,
We like
thank
to
you.
see those yellow bars.
Yes.
That's
yes.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to last item, item number 10, update, discussion, and action on the ED's report. A, March quarterly updates, El Paso Streetcar, 2013 El Paso Comprehensive Mobility Plan, and the Borderland Expressway Project. B, Texas Open Meeting Act, recent ruling from the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals. Mr. Tez?
Yes, ma'am. So item 10A is included because, as you know, we did not have a March meeting. We were scheduled to have these quarterly updates, so that's why they're on the executive director's report. This material has been provided to you. I would mention the streetcar, although we didn't develop one specifically to be included in here, we did provide the update on the prior item that Gil Gardner walked us through. So that was intended to cover the quarterly as well as the change order information. The 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan is included in your backup and in fact is also posted online as well. On Borderland Expressway, I wanted to touch on a couple of recent developments for that particular project. As we've briefly discussed in the past, the infra grant, which we were pursuing, was not submitted after discussion with TxDOT. TxDOT was not comfortable being involved in that submission, so that infra grant was not submitted. However, movement continues and forward progress continues. We continue to meet with the project coalition team, which includes members from New Mexico, the military, and various agencies from El Paso and the New Mexico region. We continue to meet with them. In fact, the city of El Paso very soon, I want to say, if it's not next week, the week after, we'll have 2 items on their agenda in support of this particular project. One of them will be a resolution, a council resolution in support of 4 specific projects, one of them being Borderland Expressway, the other 2 being the 2 I-10, Reimagine I-10 components, which are the downtown segment and off to the east, which includes the MCA area. So those 2, along with Borderland Expressway. And the 4th project that they are supporting collectively is the Artcraft interchange project as well. Second resolution that they will be presenting to council will be a resolution in support of using pass-through toll funding for the for the Northeast Parkway project as well. So that I think will be helpful in our pursuit of that particular project. So that's coming before council very soon. The remaining item I would mention is that we continue to work with the various agencies in our coalition on the development of memoranda of originally one memorandum of understanding between the parties. We've encountered some administrative procedural issues where, for example, if TxDOT were to sign the MOU and the MOU was to be signed by New Mexico DOT as well, that raises the level of signature authority up to the governor. So to avoid that, we're looking at potentially doing individual memorandums of understanding with the individual agencies so we can avoid some of those pitfalls. So we continue to work on that, and I hope to be back to you soon with an MOU, 1 or more, on this particular project. So subject to your questions, that's all I have on item 10A. Item 10B then is an informational item. The letter that was included in your backup was received by the chair. It's a letter from the governor notifying each of his appointees throughout the state that the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals had a ruling recently on the Public Information Act that declared one section of it unconstitutionally vague. That provision dealt with the requirement within the act that says members who knowingly conspired to violate the act excuse me, through intentionally meeting in quorums that are less, in meeting with board members in less than a quorum. That provision was found to be unconstitutionally vague through a court case that wound itself up through the process. The governor's letter was notifying each of the appointees, and I'll mention also that the legislature, we believe, they are going to take up this item and deal with that provision during this session. So the chair wanted me to share that information with you all, and that's really all I have for you. So subject to your questions, I think that's all we have for you on this agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Tejas. Being no further business on our agenda today, I'd take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much. So the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority meeting on April 10th is adjourned at 11:01. Thanks, everybody.